Frankie Edgar has announced that he's going to bantamweight. This is great news for a few reasons. First off, changing weight classes is just a very good way to get a fresh coat of paint. You get to start over because guess what? Guess what his record is? 0 losses. Now, it might be 0 and 0, but he's got 0 losses. It's a great move. I like it. I prefer when guys go up in weight as to when they go down. That's from a competitive standpoint, but I understand it. And the reason I took this as such good news is, first off, we have the answer. There was a big question. What's Frankie going to do? And all options were on the table in my mind. In my mind, maybe he was going to stay at 145 and just not be a title challenger. Be one of the guys, very normal part in a guy's career, right? You start at the very bottom of the card, you work your way to the main card, you go co-main, you go to the main event, and then you work your way back down. And just like you came in, at one point you weren't in the business, and at one point you're no longer in the business, right? It's just the way it goes. Is he going to do that? Is he going to go back to 155? Not likely, but not crazy. He's proved he could do it. Is he going to retire? And that was the big one that was a question mark for me, because he's a fantastic fighter. Skill-wise, he most certainly does not need to retire. But I think it was also an option. When you have a guy that is a competitor, he's not out there fighting for the money. He's out there fighting for the accomplishment. He wants to be a world champion. And when he gets in that spot where, look, we don't have a competitive architecture within the sport, right? It's not a straight line bracket like, say, the NCAA has with March Madness. It's not like that. And when you get those opportunities, it's very hard to get them again. It just is. It's a reality. So I didn't know what he was going to do. But now he's going to 135. I mean, you can't shut the door on anything, including a Frankie Edgar title shot at some point. You can't. Particularly when you have a guy like Cejudo who is calling out Frankie Edgar. I'm not predicting for you guys or reporting to you in any fashion that Frankie's going to be fighting Cejudo for a championship. I'm not. But I will stand my ground and push back to anybody that says that's simply not possible. And don't forget, hope is that's the only thing somebody wants. In life as a whole, not just this sport, you need hope. I hope that someday this can happen. And therefore, up until then, I am willing to sacrifice and struggle. You need hope. I think that we've got some real clarity here. Frankie Edgar's going to 135. Great, we established that. Frankie Edgar is not going to retire. Great, we've established that. That's my 2 cents on it. In case you guys thought this was headed somewhere brilliant, it's not. But I will tell you, as a fan, I'm happy to hear it. And I would be remiss. I had Big John on a week ago, and the show did crazy. Apparently, you guys really like Big John, or you guys like Big John and I together. I don't know. Either way, did incredible numbers. And one thing that John and I had talked about, the premise of this is less rounds in the sport, not only of MMA, but in boxing. Is that better for safety? And is that something that should be revisited? Without banging that drum again, I'm just sharing with you, that was our premise. And then we went into extend that thought, and we took it to Alexander Gustafsson, who retired. And I looked at that and I go, okay, Gus, if you want to be done, then you get to be done. But if you're done because you think you can't do this anymore, I must tell you, as an outsider, I have a better perspective of your skills and where you're at in your career than you do. That may sound arrogant, it may even sound silly, but guys, I'm right. I, meaning all of you, the viewer, us fans, have a better assessment of when a guy should be done than he does. Carlos Condit retired at the wrong time, physically. He really did. Carlos was great, and his matchups were incredibly hard, and he was very competitive, and he called it at the wrong time. Gus, if we're talking from a physical standpoint, is calling it at the wrong time. Where I bring that up and what Big John and I had talked about specifically as it pertains to Gus, is that Gus could fight anybody at any time in any arena, but don't make it a main event. Before you take yourself from the highest part of the sport and then you throw yourself out, don't forget what we talked about earlier, which is the ascension and then the descension of the sport. You're not even in it. Then you finally get a contract. Then you finally get put on TV. Then you work your way up to co-main and maybe a main, and boy, for the very rare people, a title shot. And then you work your way back down. It's the same thing as in Hollywood. The guys that's starring in the movies and name is on the marquee is all of a sudden got a lot smaller role. It's just the way that it goes. It's the nature of the business. It's the nature of the beast. It's just the way that it goes. And I thought that Gus did not follow that by taking himself from world title fights and 5-round main events against the baddest dudes in the world to out completely. If you want to be done, if it's a mental thing, then you're out. But consider following the natural progression, which is go ahead and work yourself down the card a little bit. There's no shame in that. No shame whatsoever. But it would put you in a 3-round atmosphere, which would change how hard you have to train, in fairness. And if a guy gets a little bit older, that could be helpful. It would change the stress of the evening. As I tie this back into what John and I had talked about with Gus, perhaps that is a dialogue that Frankie needs to consider. Coming into 135 is a great, brand new, fresh coat of paint. Trying to climb the ladder, respectable and honorable, and I hope that he does it. I would also suggest, as you're trying something new and you're trying a new weight class, perhaps you change the dynamic of the contest itself, which is to jump back into a 3-round fight. There's a part of when I say that comes off as anti-competitive. I don't mean for it to sound that way. I just don't have any other rhetorical skills to say what I'm thinking without saying it that way. Don't be afraid, as you're trying something new and you're taking some extra pounds off, to find yourself in a different atmosphere. Food for thought, something to consider.